Welcome to another episode of Talking Nerdy in the Bedroom with
Corey,
KJ, and Mike. And we have a special guest.
Dan here. Pleasure to meet you all.
I mean, you talking about the fans? Because I feel like we know you.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know who I am. I feel bad for your fans that they're gonna get to know
Might
me.
just be fan. Might just be Nick still.
Hey Nick.
So this week we brought Dan in because we're going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons, the new movie, possibly a little bit about the old movie, along with potentially setting up a future episode where we might actually do a campaign and actually stream it or have a video of it. We'll figure that out as we get a little bit closer to it. But before we get into all that, did you guys see the new announcements that were made in regards to like HBO merging with Discovery to turn into, instead of HBO Max and Discovery Plus, it's now going to be just called Max?
Yes.
And did you see that now it is 100% official?
Can we call it Mad Max?
I mean, they should.
They should.
They're not going to.
They missed the opportunity.
But it is now 100% official that they are doing the Harry Potter series.
10 years worth.
7 years worth.
Everything I saw today said 10 years.
The merger call or whatever it was said 7.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
I literally read multiple articles today saying 10 seasons guaranteed of Harry Potter TV show.
God.
See, everything I had seen was 7 seasons as well.
That's why you
that's
don't
weird.
listen to Corey. Yeah.
But I mean, like, I'm actually frustrated by that. Like, the
Sexually?
other series didn't come out that
Actually.
long ago. Like, why are we restarting something that's
Yay, we're-
already in existence?
We get something we didn't ask for.
Because they did Fantastic Beasts series, and it's basically as bombed. So they're going to go back to the well of something they know that did really well.
Well,
Instead of being original.
as a fan of Harry Potter, though, the movies were okay. Like, I was happy to see them, but at the same time, they left me wanting on most of them because they just totally. I mean, when did you see Quidditch after the second movie? Like, never.
In all fairness, I haven't read the books, and
Oh.
I've seen the first 3 movies.
So
Being
you're-
a 6th grade teacher, I get it spoiled for me constantly. There was no part of me that wanted to go see that because I heard about it over and over and over again, and I was burnt out before they ever came out.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we started talking about this in front of Dan.
Well, to be
I'm
fair,
burnt out. Fuck that thing. Are you interested in the series, though?
I mean, Harry Potter for me is I'm not the biggest fan of like modern fantasy, but I mean, we're also talking about Dungeons and Dragons tonight. Like medieval fantasy is my thing.
Yep.
And Harry Potter, like, it's all right. The mythos of it is not my particular interest.
My biggest concern is nothing to do with the Harry Potter aspect of it, but is there no IP that's sacred? Like, are we just going to reboot literally everything? Like, there's some things out there that are good enough or are perfect. Why touch them? Leave them alone. Why are we rebooting literally everything? Because you know it's going to make money, and that's very frustrating when you just either take something that was a good idea that was done wrong and redo it and do it right, or come up with something brand new.
There's a lot of the fan base that actually says that like the movies are not done right because there's a lot of information. You're talking about 1,000-page books put into a 90-minute movie.
Nah, it's
So-
2.5 hours, but yeah.
So putting it into a 6-hour, season or whatever it is, 40-minute episodes. I mean, you're gonna have a lot of fans that are gonna like that. My question is I don't know who the hell they cast for Harry, considering you hear all the time about how Daniel Radcliffe like is one of those actors. It's like that's all you're known for.
You're typecast.
It's very hard. Yeah, very hard to get work after that.
The other thing is, can you see anybody else being Harry Potter? Like, if I think Harry Potter, I'm just going to think Daniel Radcliffe.
Right.
Well,
So,
yeah, I mean, that's because that's the only live action adaptation you have.
doesn't
right now.
matter. When somebody does the role that well, you're going to always associate that with that. And then you're going to see the new adaptation and be like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how many...
So who do you think of when you think of Spider-Man?
Tobey Maguire.
Right, me too. But at the same time, like
That's the
Tom
original.
Holland's in my mind as Spider-Man too.
Sure.
And
But
I don't think
how many
one
kids
takes
are
away
out
from the
there
other.
born with a lightning bolt on their head? I mean, you just can't make that.
I mean, he wasn't born with one.
Yeah, and
It
you
came
do make
afterwards.
it. That's how it happens.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Next-
I had a point.
You
Let's
survived
ignore
the
that.
killing curse because your mother like loved
Loves
you or
you.
something. Apparently, she was the only
Apparently
mother.
mother. The only
Apparently,
mother that
yeah,
loved.
mother
Nobody
loved
else loves their kids. They were all like, you know what?
just
I have
take
three. I have three. You know, you could.
I can make another one later.
Yeah,
It's fine.
yeah.
Just take it. It's
So
fine.
here's another hot take for you all. Something that I dislike passionately is when people are like, the movie wasn't accurate enough to the book. And part of that for me is movies are a different format, like Ready Player One. The movie was so different than the book. And if they made the book into the movie exactly as the book was written, it would be so boring. Like, I don't want to watch, Parzival playing Joust in a cave against a lich. Like, that doesn't make for good movie. Sometimes they have to change in order to be something better for the screen. And, if I want Harry Potter the book, I'll go read Harry Potter the book. And if they're going to make some changes, I can appreciate those changes for what they are and enjoy the movies in a different way than I would the books, because they're different media. It's a different retelling of the same story.
So I am almost in a complete agreement with you, except there are some movies where they stray so far from the book or the source material.
Agreed.
Where it's a completely different thing, and you're like, why would you, if you're trying to tell a different story, I get it, but they call it a different fucking name, or call it
here's
that
what I
name,
love.
colon, something else, and it's a side
They're making
movie.
an Aragon series.
Yes.
Like, thank
Are they
God.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
all going to be on
thank
Disney
God,
Plus.
that movie.
It's going to be, and the movie was terrible. It strayed
would've
so
watched the
far
second
you
one,
couldn't
though.
get,
I
like,
would've
it
also
couldn't
watched
go
the second one.
forward.
Yeah.
Did you know there's a 5th book coming out?
No, honestly, I haven't read the 4th.
Oh yeah, he just announced it. It's called Murtagh.
Oh, okay. It's gonna be focused on him, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't
No,
really
it's
remember.
just going to be the name.
Well, I mean, I can't. I don't want to spoil the book. I mean, it's been out for a while, but I thought he
Nope.
dies.
Nope.
No, okay. It's been a long time since I read the first 3. I mean, I read the first one like right when it came out. Second one right when it came out. Third one, I think I was in college when it came out, and like I read it, but I remember much less of that one. Like,
Yeah,
I feel
and
like I was
actually,
reading.
Christopher Paolini came out with a really good sci-fi book called "To Sleep in a Sea of Stars." Like space exploration, very well done.
But
Cool.
I think you're proving my point here, because there's something that was done in the past that was done pretty shittily,
Right.
and now they're going to reboot it and hopefully make it better.
Right, if it's done crap and you want to redo
Reboot
it,
it,
please
absolutely.
do.
But why
Well,
take something that's
I
done
think-
pretty well and reboot
I think
it?
that's the thing with Harry Potter. So the reason I'm excited for a series is because they can explore a lot more from the books than they did in the movie. But the movies themselves, as much as like I watched them and enjoyed them, they're just not that good. They had a lot of different directors. Like my favorite ones are the first 2 because I thought they were well done, probably better acted than any of the other ones. And then they got this new director in the 3rd movie, and that one was okay. And then it just kept going downhill after
Yeah,
that.
it was Chris Columbus did the first 2, right?
I think so, yeah. And I really liked
Actually,
those.
Chris Columbus.
Yeah, like from 1492.
Nice.
And the
That makes sense.
the Dumbledore I know passed away after the second movie, so nothing you can do about that. But he was perfect.
I mean,
as
you
Dumbledore.
That's
can now.
not true.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now they can. But the
You
guy
got
they
Grand
got to
Moff
replace
Tarkin who
him,
died 20 years ago.
the guy they got to replace him was just like, I don't know, just did it in a completely different way.
Yeah, but part
and
of
it
that
was
is also the
bad.
director.
I
telling
agree.
them that's what you want and how
Yeah.
to do it,
and
not
and the
having
whole
it be
thing-
such a laid-back
whole
character.
thing started sucking after the 3rd one, pretty much.
So it sucked so much while we were in Vegas and you got sick, you decided to have a Harry Potter marathon.
I'm saying Lord of the Rings movies stray from the. I mean, they have characters missing that are like people love. Like Tom Bombadil is a very popular character if you read the books.
But I mean, if the
But
books are so long,
you don't need him in the movie.
right?
I agree.
He doesn't do anything.
No.
He's a cool character.
He doesn't
in the spot that he's in,
perpetuate the
but
story.
right, he does nothing.
There's too much in those books already.
I kind of disagree with that. Tom Bombadil shows up and he kind of gives you the idea that there's all-powerful beings and they just choose not to do anything. He's like, I could take care of this, but I won't.
You're not wrong.
Like, you...
God, we have another KJ.
No, it just sounds like God.
KJ never says you're
I
right.
could
he always
do
says you're
something.
not wrong. So-
Like I think he's a
You're not
cool
wrong.
character just in like that kind of aspect because you don't really see like I don't know like S tier
Well,
creatures.
but-
I mean, other than like Gandalf, like you think wizards are like the highest beings, but they're really not.
No, I mean in the mythos of Lord of the Rings, before Sauron and there was Morgoth in the First Age,
Right.
The Balrog is in the mythology of Lord of the Rings about as powerful as Gandalf. And then there were beings before them who were more powerful, but there weren't that many of them.
Right.
I always just say like Gandalf. I mean, this is a super religious simplification. Gandalf's an angel. Balrog is a fallen angel. Like, I mean, that's basically how Tolkien
A demon.
set it up. It's somebody who was. It's what were they called? Valar, right?
Yes, the
Is what they
Valar
are.
and the Maiar.
Yeah. Oh wait, so now I might be mixing them up. Gandalf's a.
I think I don't see some of the mythos that goes like into the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
Some of that escapes me.
Well, the understanding I have is Balrog and Gandalf are the same kind of being. It's just one fell and took, a different path, and that's becomes a Balrog over time, and then the other, comes to Earth to help people, or Middle Earth to help people, and that's Gandalf and Saruman and the two blue wizards
And Radagast.
Radagast, yeah. And then you have I can't remember all the other ones, but anyway,
Treebeard is also a super being as well. He's just really fucking old.
he's Groot,
Yeah. But he's
but
like
he can say more.
he's like 5,000 years old, 10,000 years old.
I don't
But-
know.
but you know
Gotta
the
cut
thing
him
about-
open, see his rings, and you can.
Lord of the Rings will always hold a special spot
The
in my
Lord
heart.
of the Rings is
Uh,
cut a tree open.
Along with Willow. And for whatever reason,
you
those are the epitome of fantasy films for me. And the reason for that, for me, is they do something unique in the fantasy setting. Because most fantasy movies, you're watching, these characters who can do everything. They're the fighters or the wizards, or they have this like destiny that has befallen them. And in Willow, you have Willow, who's just a nobody who can't really do magic and kind of figures it out and goes back to his life as just a normal person. And in Lord of the Rings, the hobbits are us. They're the us's of
Yeah.
the world.
Yep.
And the fact that they are just good people doing good things, and they make the world better by doing good things, is such a cool thing to see in a fantasy story, because it almost never happens.
Yeah, I agree.
So-
I don't know much about Willow, but yeah, Lord of the Rings to me was always the epitome of fantasy, and honestly has been, I don't want to say stolen from, because I think you take ideas and apply it. It's really hard not to do
Right,
that.
because
in
even
literature.
Lord of the Rings was stolen from a lot of like Welsh mythology,
Yeah,
and Tolkien was, using other things. And he was a famous linguist. Like, one of the first things he did was to translate Beowulf.
Yeah. But I think what I was gonna say is basically just the fact that like so many of the types of characters, like orcs and all these things, we see in tons of fantasy nowadays, and he basically like created the name, at least, whether or not the description of them was from something.
Right, like
that-
Bradley Cooper's.
What's that?
I said like Bradley Cooper's, but we're a little early for that comment.
Yeah.
I'm very confused.
I don't get that reference.
Bradley Cooper's a hobbit in the
What?
Dungeons and Dragons film.
Is he?
Is he? Yes, that's right. I forgot.
is a
yeah,
hobbit.
Oh, that's right. He is. He's the one
Holga's-
that's dating Michelle, or was dating Michelle Rodriguez.
Holga.
Yeah, Holga. I totally forgot that he was even in there.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right. So yeah, let's jump into Dungeons and Dragons. It was a good little transition there. I liked it. All right. So we're gonna briefly talk about the crappy one, which is the one from 2000
Jeremy Irons.
called.
isn't it?
It's just called Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you end up watching it, or did you shut it off and never go back to it?
Off.
Off. So Corey and I watched it, and it wasn't good. It was very bad. It spent the first 15 or 20 minutes of the movie. You're just on the villain. You're not even on anybody. You're not setting up any characters. You're literally just on the villain, which was a super weird way to start a movie.
You gotta respect snails, though.
I know.
It was just so weird to see a movie start like that. And this was released in theaters, too.
Probably, yeah. It was a big.
Yeah,
it was
I
a
think the
decent
big issue with
budget.
that was at the time TSR didn't have the money for a big budget film. They couldn't get a good director or writer, and it was so hammy. Like at one point in time, I think a character even mentions like, "My dad's an 11th level mage," and it's like, come on,
Yeah.
who says that?
And it was also like it just felt like a sci-fi movie, like it's something I'd see on like regular network TV. That's what it felt like, and it was supposed to be a big budget-ish.
Oh,
not big budget, but like it's supposed to be the Dungeons and Dragons type of movie.
It was like $48 million bucks. They made that movie. So
So that's a decent amount of money
in
but
2000.
in 2000, but it's not like other movies came out in that same realm
could
that
not
were
have
200 million.
profited off 48 million.
It didn't. No,
No.
it did not. And people have also like gone back and seen the movie again, or people like us that like I had never watched it, so I just watched it, and it's awful. And
The thing
so
that
many-
It still
I'll-
holds a special place in my
does
heart,
it?
though.
Is it because of the love of Dungeons and Dragons, though?
Somewhat, and like if you're a fan of the game, there are so many calls to the game and references that it's got a certain charm in that aspect. But if you're not a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons, it's garbage. Like there's nothing redeeming
So
about it.
it's not really for a casual fan to enjoy. It's more for somebody that's actually somewhat a diehard, or at least knows what these things are.
And even then, it's more of a farce than anything.
Yeah.
Like it's just bad storytelling. And if you really want to hate yourself and waste some time, watch the second one.
Yeah, we didn't know there was a second
You can't
one.
get it. So
It's not on Amazon.
Prime
Oh, I
doesn't
have
them.
it on DVD.
Oh, you
if you want to
sad
borrow it.
bastard.
Sweet.
That's
what I've been waiting for.
It's the
It's on
third one that I
DVD.
can't find.
Oh, jeez. Like,
Is the third one?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but it's supposedly like makes the first one seem like Lord of the Rings.
oh, so it's that good, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
I could never.
Is it better than Rubber?
Oh, I doubt
Rubber's
he's-
amazing.
Oh, my
I
God.
love Rubber.
There's certain aspects of Rubber, like the very beginning, we seem to really enjoy Rubber. And then in the end, it was like, as you got 10, 15 minutes into it, it's just like, oh my God, this is so bad, it might be good. And then it just kept getting worse.
That's the story with every Rubber.
Yeah.
It's good for the
There's only
first 15
one
minutes.
scene in Rubber I really liked, and it's when
The climax?
No.
Ha!
When the person's showering or whatever, and then he just rolls up like a creeper. It just cracked me up. But
That's higher
and
than
I
a little bit
also
of a
kind
curve.
of appreciate that the background narrative is basically saying people will watch anything.
Yes.
And then, I mean, if you step outside of having suffered through watching it for 2 hours, it's pretty funny. Their point is proven because we watched it for 2 fucking hours. So.
Yeah. I mean, we watched it on purpose, though, like, because we knew it was bad.
I know.
It wasn't like I had no expectations going into that movie thinking, hey, this is going to be cinema
Yeah, it's gonna
gold
be
over
A+.
here.
So back to the D&D movie for a minute. So the part that I thought was the most ridiculous in the movie was, if you remember, when they go into the map and then they come out and then they spend like the next 5 minutes literally describing the entire plot. Like it's one of those scenes where it's so obvious it's directed at the viewer versus natural scene in the fucking movie. But I remember me and you just stopped at that point. We're like, this is so stupid.
Like fourth wall kind
I
of
am
shit.
so gonna flex my nerd cred right now.
Okay.
I've got to get you guys the DVDs so you can watch the behind the scenes or the extra scenes because they actually filmed the in the map scenes.
Oh, okay.
But it was so bad they just didn't put it in the movie, and they were like, "We
God,
need
if
to
it's
find
that
another
bad
way.
with
Oh,
as
yeah.
bad as the movie is, God, I don't know if I want
Like
to watch
they
it.
just never even finished it. It's like
Oh.
you can still see the green screen in the background. It's bad.
They didn't want it to ruin the masterpiece.
Oh, that's
that
what
the
it
movie.
was.
So, you know,
if we
the other
put those in, it'll just ruin the movie.
the other thing that I don't know, it seemed ridiculous to me is the dragons. I don't know if you noticed, but like their nose was like Puff the Magic Dragon. It wasn't like a ferocious looking dragon. It looked like a cartoon character or something.
Yeah,
That's
the
what dragons
didn't
really look
good.
like.
Oh yeah, do they really?
They do.
Yeah.
There was also
That's why
a
they're
scene...
called dragons, because their nose drags on the ground.
Oh,
See, this
okay.
guy gets it.
I
But no,
don't
there
think
was also
that's
a
what's dragon.
there was also a
Squidward.
scene where they go into a portal, like one right after the other.
Oh, and then they come
it's
out at
like a
different
minute
times.
gap before the other one comes out, and it's the portal closes and another one opens, which made no sense.
To be
Because-
fair, like I don't know how, like we don't
Yeah,
know
I
how
didn't know
magic
portals
work.
But there was 3 other portals in the movie, and it just stayed open.
I guess,
and they
but
walked right through, no problem.
I'm gonna allow it in the
Oh, you're gonna allow it?
Well, let's put it this way: of all the stupid things in that movie, that one didn't hold me up. Like I was like, okay, whatever, I don't give a shit.
All right, enough about the crappy movie. Let's talk about the actual relatively good movie.
The second one,
Yeah.
No.
The third one. I think.
Yeah, apparently.
Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Amongst Thieves,
Yes.
right? Which is based on a Dungeons and Dragons book.
You know, I don't actually know that.
Okay,
I never got into the like books and mythology. I know about the different worlds,
yeah,
and like
yeah.
I know the world this one was set in. I knew all the characters and locations and stuff, but I don't know a lot of the specific stories.
Okay, because what I watched an interview with Chris Pine, and they basically asked him, "This is based off the first book. Is there going to be a sequel off the second book?" And he was like, "I didn't even know there was a book." Like, but he did make it sound like they are indeed going to make a sequel for sure. So that's good, because I liked this movie overall.
Yeah, it did a lot of things right this time that the first one got wrong. Like instead of being like Dungeons and Dragons and just shoving it down your throat, it was a story that took place in one of the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons, and their most well-known world at that. You know, because even their video games, Neverwinter Nights on the computer was huge. Baldur's Gate was huge. And those were the locations where this was taking place. And they mention Icewind Dale. So it really pulled in a lot of that, the most well-known places because of their more popular video game franchises. So it was very smart to do that. And then in, you know, the Dungeons and Dragons mythos, the real big villains in the Forgotten Realms world are the Red Wizards of Thay. So to have them be the villains in the story was a very smart way to get that mythos and Dungeons and Dragons feel in there for the people who know what that is without being, again, like 11th level mage.
Right.
Yeah, I will say, I didn't feel like they were trying to force anything down anybody's throat, and a casual could just watch this and just enjoy the movie for what it was.
Filthy casuals.
But like me, I've played a couple D&D campaigns with Corey that have been awful, and then one that we just started that's actually been pretty fun. And
Well, to be fair, the other two were not D&D campaigns, which is probably why they were so bad.
it was just bad.
We tried a supernatural-based RPG book.
I struggle with anything outside of the fantasy realm. I can do
Yeah.
sci-fi a little bit, but other than that, it's tough.
Well, it's just the rules for some of them are very convoluted, and Supernatural had like a specific attribute that was weird. It was almost like luck, basically, but it wasn't, and it applied kind of randomly. And
Yeah, it was because of God.
So
Yeah.
speaking of that, I was actually thinking about that on my way over, about the dichotomy of the first movie versus this more recent movie. And, you know, even when I play Dungeons and Dragons, the rules exist to make things happen, but ultimately it's the story that really matters.
Yeah.
And if you have a group that focuses on numbers or fights or items or whatever, you kind of lose that focus of the story. And it felt like the first movie really had that kind of like focus on, I want to level up or I want to do these things. And it was so ingrained in the rules, and they tried to present the rules as a movie. And this one, the rules existed in the movie, but they were there to push the story forward. And that's similar to how I run my D&D games.
Did we see any of the characters level up?
I mean, essentially, you see the wizard, like he goes from being a bumbling idiot to being able to wear the helm.
Sure.
Yeah,
I
But
guess
I
that's
don't really
fine.
necessarily call that leveling up.
See,
That's just
I-
character development.
He
I-
just
I-
rolled. He rolled a crit 20.
Well,
Yeah, he made a will save. That's what
Yeah.
it was.
But
He
what I
made
mean
it
is,
past.
you might not see them like, oh, all of a sudden I'm level 6 or something, but it seemed more of a natural level up to me. Like they developed like in any other movie, but in the D&D universe, behind the scenes, I was thinking, oh, that guy just leveled up finally. Like he sucked for a very long time, and now he's a level 2.
Well, I'll say for a casual person, Like that's not an indication for them, which I think is a good thing. It
Yeah.
wasn't like one of those things where they had to do a specific call out, but someone like you or anybody that does D&D might be like, oh, that's probably what happened. They leveled up or they
Well, I mean,
experience or spent time or
essentially
whatever.
leveling up in the D&D is supposed to be, I mean, it just basically changes your stats. But in terms of how the story, it's not like you're walking into a town and Dan's going to go, oh, a great gold light shines down and a big number 2 pops over your head now. It's supposed to be more natural and your character just develops like they would in any other story. So to me, that's all I took that as, is like they were naturally leveling up. They're
Yep.
getting better and better.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's most movies that do that too.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. Yeah, I don't think it needed to be some
blatantly
big deal.
called out. Yeah. Which is one of the things I think that made this a better movie, because it just felt like a movie with a D&D story rather than a D&D movie. It's just a story with a D&D background. That's fine.
There's tons of like great stories that they could just make movies out of, and like Critical Role has like this huge contract with Amazon now where they've got Vox Machina, and they have another series coming out. I don't know what their other campaign was called, but I've been watching Vox Machina and I really I don't know how to,
I don't know what that is.
but it's really good. You haven't seen it?
No.
Oh, you really like it.
It's a cartoon, right?
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
like adult-oriented cartoon. Yeah, so it's like an adult-oriented cartoon.
Thanks for saying that twice, Corey.
Because I don't.
Jesus
I need,
Christ.
all right, fuck it. You go then.
Jesus.
You
All
can
right.
go.
Let's move away from Corey's shitty Amazon show. So the movie
getting so angry.
in general, is it something that with you liking D&D, Dan, is it something that you were instantly like, yes, I have to go see this? Or were you a little bit, I know the 2001 holds a special place in your heart, but it's a bad movie.
You know, it was a tough thing for me because with the whole, like, I'm annoyed with Hasbro. Hasbro in general has really been pissing me off the last year. They don't care about their customers. They don't care about community. Like, they care about the almighty dollar right now.
Yeah, the $4 billion that they're making.
Right.
off
And
this
like the whole
franchise.
OGL thing, are you familiar with that, with what happened with Dungeons and Dragons?
No.
So Dungeons and Dragons has something called the Open Gaming License, or OGL, and that's where Pathfinder, Green Ronin, a bunch of other game systems kind of use D&D's rule set to get themselves started, because D&D said, we made this rule set, you can't use any of our IP, but you can use our rule set and have other settings or rules based on this.
Yep.
And then there was a leak that came out that Hasbro was changing the OGL. And now it was, if you use anything with their rule set, you'd get like 60 days to use it. And then they would start getting royalties from everything. And it was like, whoa, like no one's stepping on your IPs. You're still the big people out there. And everybody was like, this is not acceptable. Like, you can't do this to a community that you've built and then just all of a sudden bilk them for everything they have. And there was a lot to it that I don't understand because I don't know business, but it was, everyone who read it was like, this is terrible for all of these other businesses. And everybody was like, you can't, like D&D, you can't do this. Like Hasbro, you can't do this. You've made some missteps with Magic, and now you're really doing this. And the D&D community reacted because they had the D&D Beyond, the online subscriptions, dropped by almost 50% when this happened, because they were like, we're not doing this. All of the other gaming companies started getting together and creating other open gaming licenses.
Did they end up reverting back or no?
They did, but only because they didn't have a choice.
Okay.
Like originally they were like, oh yeah, we're going to review this and go back. And then they were like, no, we're going to go through with it. And then the other companies, specifically Paizo, got together with other companies and were like, we're going to make our own OGL and we're going to give it to an independent board outside of us. So we can't go back and say,
Ever get greedy?
right, we can't ever get greedy. It'll exist here for everybody to use. And at that point in time, it shot Hasbro in the foot because they lost everything they had. And they never apologized for it. They never talked about their community or what they did. And the same thing has happened with Magic. And there's a lot of Magic burnout because it's too much coming out and too many exclusives and too many one-ofs. And people just, they can't keep affording to play the game because it's getting so expensive. And they're forgetting that these games are a community game, and they're pushing it from the aspect of a business. So Hasbro did a lot to really upset the D&D community, and then this movie came out. And Hasbro, the E1 or whatever it was, flagship of Hasbro, was one of the producers of this. So the money did go to Hasbro. So I felt a little guilty for that aspect of it. But I went to go see it because I was like, this is a hobby that I'm passionate about. For most of my life, it's been ridiculed. Like I was, when I was younger, I was made fun of for playing Dungeons and Dragons. Now I run after school clubs that kids are begging to be in to play Dungeons and Dragons. And so I went to go see it because it mattered that much to me. And it was a way to see my hobby become more mainstream and more accepted and more, something where people see the positives of it. And I appreciated that, but I felt bad that I was supporting Hasbro with it, but understood that what was going to happen when I saw it. Does that make sense?
It does, but I feel like a shitty person because I don't think I've ever gone and seen a movie and thought, my money's going to support X, Y, or Z. I've just literally gone and been like, I'm going to go see a movie.
I mean, normally it's not something you ever have to think about, but in this one, it was just such a this just happened, and it was so big in that community.
Yeah,
there was no way to avoid it when you went to go see the movie.
Gotcha. So you went and saw it a different time than we did, and Corey went and saw it with his son, I believe. How was your theater with the people in there? People seem to enjoy it? Like, I know we had a couple moments with big laughs in there, especially with the fat dragon.
Oh yeah,
that killed.
People loved it. Everyone that I went to go see it with loved it, and I went with 5 people, me and 4 others, and 4 of the 5 of us are pretty active D&D players, or at least had been at one point in time. Jeff went with us, and Jeff is not a big role player, but he knew enough of the mythos and knew enough from being around other gamers that he really enjoyed it for what it was. But everyone else, they really loved it. Like, it was, the characters were endearing. They had quirks. They weren't perfect. They made mistakes. There was growth. It was quality storytelling.
Yeah, which I gotta say I wasn't really expecting from this type of movie. And that was without, especially if I had watched the 2001 first. I really wouldn't have been expecting it. But yeah, just going into this movie, I wasn't, even though I heard it got some good reviews and everything, I wasn't really expecting a story that would make me care about the characters. And it did. I cared about most of those characters. The only one I didn't really care about was the daughter that much, but everybody else I very much cared about.
And it was, there was some other things they did that were very clever. And, the more ingrained you get in role playing, the more you see it in there. There was some very tropey things that they did, but they did it so well. The whole, you have to go get the helmet to do the thing. Mm-hmm. That go on a quest for the item is such a huge D&D trope. Yep. And they made it work in the movie without it making seem, again, like it was shoving it down your throat.
See, I felt the opposite.
The items being in the D&D thing.
But I thought it was done in a good way. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
The different items that are in the D&D are kind of cool too. She finds the axe.
Right.
And it's dark steel, which is a big, that's even in Magic. They have the dark steel.
Yeah, stuff. And everything was so natural how it happened though. Because there was nothing of we went in the Dragon's Horde and we found a +5 weapon. It was you found something and they used it and they didn't have to say what it did. It just did something.
But the other characters know what that is. She says, "Oh, it's dark steel," and the other person that she was with kind of recognized it as being such. You see dark steel axe and it's indestructible.
Right.
Are we talking about the time where they were trying to chop off her head?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when the axe that they were gonna cut the head off with, was it Commander or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah, dark steel is a thing, and even in Magic, that is just whatever is made of dark steel is an indestructible artifact.
So I didn't know that, but I think the scene still worked without knowing that because it just looked like she is. So she's a mercenary type that I just think thought the weapon was cool, and not that I knew that she knew it was indestructible because I had no idea that that's what that meant.
Yeah, you kind of see it again too when it falls in the forge and it gets covered in slag, and she's like, "Oh, that looks really cool." like it's not able to be destroyed that way.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and there was other things too that I really liked that they did, like Paladin, in the game as a class you can be, but it's also a title. Fighter is not really a title. It's just kind of what you are, or Bard, not necessarily what you are, but they did use like Sorcerer, which is a very specific type of magic. And she was very obviously, at least in my eyes, a barbarian. But they never said that. They never came out and said, like, this is a barbarian or I'm a barbarian.
Right.
They just made it evident with her attire and how she acted.
Being from a tribe.
Right. And they did some things just to kind of hint at it. And one of the other things that I really liked about it is there's, for me, when I do fantasy, if it gets too far outside of the realm of reality, I just kind of lose the feeling of me being in that fantasy world. And in Dungeons and Dragons, you have Dragonborn as characters, and you have tieflings, and all these things that don't look human. And in the movie, they had that, like, bird person in the jail. So they had that representation.
An avian, right?
Yeah, I don't remember what they specifically called it. I don't even know the name of the race.
So
but
you have Dragonborn, avian, human.
yeah, but
What was his name?
almost
Andrew? That was
yeah, it was a very
scene.
common name. It was very well done, but they let you know that these other races and beings existed in this world, but they kept it grounded with mostly human-looking characters. And I thought it was a good way to represent the world and allow people into it, because if you have a world where nobody's human, it's tough to connect. So they did a very good job at just really making the world open to everybody.
Yeah. So, Corey, you went with your kiddo. How did he feel? Because obviously he's, I don't know how old your kid is, 12, 13, 17? Is he 21 yet?
He's 10.
Yeah, I was close with 21. So, a 10-year-old at the movie, was he interested the whole time? Was he engaged?
Yeah,
or?
he liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so that's good. That it speaks to like that wider audience, not just so you can have a casual, you can have a kid, you can have the D&D hardcore people. Did it have the moments like we had talked about where like the fat dragon killed when Mike and I saw it? Did you have moments like that in the theater? Because you went like opening weekend, I think.
I don't remember honestly, but I mean, I think he thought those scenes were funny. I know he thought the Andrew Bird escape scene was funny. I did too.
That is a good scene. That's a very
but
good
he's
scene.
usually kind of reserved like that.
Yeah, that was even better.
Yeah. And then I liked when Forge tries to
Where they
hit it
try to
again.
get at the end. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one.
No, yeah, he laughed at it. I think sometimes maybe, I mean, he doesn't have the background, but you don't really need it for that movie either. So
No, it
I
definitely
think he's
is for like a
interested now,
casual.
and he knows that we're playing a campaign.
Yeah.
So now he's interested to play a campaign, but like, I don't feel like I could ever do it because all of my campaigns are like raunchy and.
That's true. That's who you are as a person.
We've been through this. It's because I'm not that way as a person.
So when it's fantasy, Corey's all about it.
Damn straight. I mean, that's the fun of fantasies. You get to play a character that is not you. Like, you get to embody someone who walks a different path than you do.
Yeah, and keep in mind, too, for me, I take my role-playing to the extremes because I run the local LARP.
Right,
So, like,
yeah.
I'm not
local LARP. You guys LARP around here?
Yeah, there's a whole medieval community in Jefferson.
Oh, no, that's what I knew about that one. I thought, well, I didn't realize you ran it. I thought.
Yeah, I've been the GM for the last 4 years. This is my
had
fifth
no
year.
idea that.
I'm retiring at the end of this
I
year.
thought you would were a player in it.
No, me and my friend Brandon create the stories, run the whole thing. We do 3 weekends a year because 70 people play.
I know you've always
It's
said I
huge.
should try it, and I really want to. I'll tell you what, if you can get these guys to try it, I would
go.
try it. I'd try it.
Just put up a
I just
camera,
want to start as
live
like an
stream it.
NPC. I want to be like the innkeeper or like a bartender.
That's true. I think it would
I can
be,
be like,
equally fun to be like a.
I'll just be cleaning steins all day. Mm-hmm.
It'd be
I
a
want you
great-
to make
great
that grunt
interactions, Yeah.
the whole time.
I'd be like, hi,
just be
innkeep, I'm
sling
looking for
blade through the whole
XYZ.
thing.
How's that cup coming along?
I'll clean it.
Yeah, cleaning it right up.
So what did you guys think about the things in there that were supposed to be like D&D specific, like obviously like the treasure chest that was like a booby trap,
The mimic.
tongue,
Yeah.
mimic, yeah. Like things like that within the context of the movie. Did those things live up to your expectations from the D&D games that you've run? Like having those certain things in the movie, did they feel out of place? Did they feel where they should happen? Did happen?
So, yes. And again, for me, I've never actually had a mimic in one of my D&D games because it's just, it's kind of like you're in a dungeon crawl type thing. And that's generally not the type of stories that I tell. But for those people who do use those, it was very, very well done because it was just there. They didn't really like focus on it much. And it made it a very real experience for them in a situation where it made sense for it to be there. So it just felt very good in that moment.
I will say, too, after watching the 2000 one where you have to go into like the labyrinth, that labyrinth was awful compared to this new one where it's kind of, it's obviously mostly because of CGI, but it's kind of like ever flowing and changing and moving, this labyrinth. And the one in 2000, that terrible movie, they just walk into a door that has some chains on it, and then he walks through and then has to like jump on some swinging blades to get over to the next side. It was awful.
So,
and then when I have this one, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
If you ever get a chance, and I'm going to plug this, I love these guys, but there should be a fourth movie coming out, but there's a group of people called the Dead Gentlemen or Zombie Orpheus Entertainment. They're part of the same group, but there's a movie called The Gamers, and then there's Gamers 2, Darkness Rising, and Gamers 3, Hands of Fate. And the first one's like 40 minutes long, and it's just a bunch of dudes hanging out, playing D&D in their college dorm. And then it cuts to them acting out all of their characters' parts. So you see them playing the game in real life, and then you see them as the characters acting it out. And it's very tongue-in-cheek. It makes fun of a lot of very tropey things. Very, very well done on a very low budget. The second movie has a great story, great acting, good budget, and really captures what it feels like to play D&D with people who care about the game and care about the community. It is one of the two best things I've ever seen that represents gaming. The other one is a YouTube series that's actually on, it's called LARPs. It's a Canadian production, but it's on Geek and Sundry, Felicia Day's channel.
Oh, yeah.
But again, very, very good. You can see the love they have for it. They don't make fun of it. It's very serious. And the comedy is real comedy set in the situation where people are doing this thing they love. And the comedy is not that they're doing it. The comedy is like you would see in anything.
Right. So there is a, what's that? Harmon Quest?
Harmon Quest.
Yeah, Harmon Quest. Before I even liked D&D or did a campaign, he was talking about Harmon Quest and eventually got me the episodes. And that was very similar in the sense, except it's animated, where you see them live action playing D&D, and then it cuts to the animated stuff and it doing it. And depending on the guest they had, which episode, you could tell that there were certain people that actually loved D&D, had certain things that they would do, and enjoyed the campaign. And then other people, was it like Aubrey Plaza was in there one time, and her character was awful because I don't think that she necessarily plays D&D. I think she was just on there as maybe like a favor to
Thomas Middleditch was one of my favorite ones. He plays a halfling, I guess, not a hobbit, but same idea. And he's just smoking pipe the whole time. I mean, but the thing is, I think to Dan's point, the Gamers takes it more seriously. Harmon Quest was more or less like a comedy campaign, which is fine. Like you can have a more like most like our campaign we're running.
It's very comedy.
It's very comedy based. Like, but that's just my style.
I don't think that necessarily the story is. I think just because we're all idiots that it goes to the point of comedy.
That's one of the things I've accepted in running a game is just that like my plans are going to go out the window immediately, especially with you, because you just like have a habit of. I'm like, there's a bunch of innocent people trapped on tables and they're unconscious. And,
Kill them.
And Roger's like, well, I'm going to see if I can heal. And Cage is like, stab him again.
In my defense, they might have had some gold on them.
Here's a character who's going to help you, and you stab him.
I gave him a chance.
Yeah.
I put a knife to its throat first. I didn't immediately go to stabbing.
I actually think you'd be a better GM because you are very controlling. And when the NPCs don't do what you want them to do, you take it as a slight and stab them. But as GM, you can make them do whatever you want to do.
That's true. And if you guys tried to deviate, I would make something happen that would put you back on course.
So what you should do, Corey, is you just should have an NPC who has little portals all over them. And whenever KJ goes to stab them, it just comes back out and stabs KJ.
Well, he almost like screwed them because he attacked a guy that was a little bit above their weight class, but
we killed him. Yeah. I got this.
They got a lot of experience for it. Yeah, that's the shitty thing. It's like he ruins my plan, but then I'm like, well, you do technically get experience.
Yeah, you get a lot of experience for that. Yeah,
that's why you kill everything you can.
I killed a baby.
Right? How much experience do I get for the peasant?
Yeah, you didn't get experience.
Yeah, what the hell?
You'll experience the sixth circle of hell. But...
Yeah, you did get experience, but I don't think it's what you needed.
Yeah, that's probably true. All right, so for the movie and the villain, because technically there are two villains, with being Hugh Grant and then being the Red Witch or whatever she's called. What did we think about that? Did we immediately know Hugh Grant was going to be the bad guy, or was that something that was more of...
I didn't really
surprise.
Think he was a bad guy. I think he was just a criminal who wanted money, much like they did.
He is a con man. I mean,
to be fair, he also then kidnapped the daughter.
But he thought he could give her a better life.
Yeah, he was a villain in the aspect of he did things he shouldn't have done and screwed people over doing it. She was a villain in the way of I'm going to murder a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Their levels of villainy were
Was it
very
really
different scales.
Murder or was it control? I thought that whole thing coming out of her.
But that turns them into undead. That's the whole thing of the Red Wizards. They're all liches and weird things
does it kill them or just...
Yeah, it turns them into zombies.
I mean, if it changes you from living to zombie, I feel like that's worse than I stole your money.
Even if it just changes you, period. I'm going to do this to you and now you're completely different. I've essentially killed you then.
But, okay, if she then dies or whatever, do those people come back? Or
they also die.
They would die too. Okay.
Yeah, I assume they wouldn't come back. But then again, it all depends on the person telling the story.
Fair.
My biggest criticism is that she was just kind of... There was no motivation. Why was she really doing this? And they didn't develop that part enough for me. Especially if there's going to be more, I wish they had developed the Red Wizards a little bit more.
I thought they did. I thought the Red Wizards had done this in their land and they were trying to spread.
Yes.
So she was sent as a spy to make this happen in one of the biggest cities, and they drew all the people to that city for the tournament. So I thought the point was that this is the first step in a bigger invasion from... So I imagine if they make a second movie, it will be about them,
continuing.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give you that. I guess it just didn't have enough pull or appeal for me to be really this is a villain who's doing something they're passionate about. They were just kind of doing it because I was told to do it.
Yeah, she was basically the henchman. I feel like the big bad...
Was in the corner?
The one with
in the corner in the eyes? He's in the shadows?
Yeah, talking.
They mention it's Zoss Tom, Zass, last name Tam, and he is a lich.
I thought you were going to say Tom. Last name Tom.
And he is villainy royalty in the Dungeons and Dragons world, but to go into how he became what he is, you really have to understand the rules and mythos of Dungeons and Dragons to get to that level of who is he and what did he do to get there.
Well, I'll say I think he looked kind of the coolest while being in the corner with the eyes. He looked mysterious and creepy and like the villain or the villain behind the villain. So I like that we didn't get a lot of that if they do a sequel. If we don't get a sequel, that'll be a little bit annoying just in the sense of
they're gotta
definitely
make a sequel.
doing a sequel.
they had no plans to do a sequel when they released this movie. Now,
Yeah, until they saw the money.
they haven't made enough money yet, but the movie's only been out a little bit. They're still losing money right now. The budget of 150 million, they've made 126. So it still has more money to make.
And
Take
then,
that,
but then
Hasbro.
it's gonna hit DVD.
DVD, yeah.
Sure,
they haven't even
yeah,
made,
yeah.
They haven't
It's
even
gonna
made
blow it out
sales
of the
yet.
But you also got to remember that the 150 budget doesn't include advertising for the movie, and this movie was very much advertised, which is usually roughly around like a half to a third of what, if not more, what the budget was. So
they're
you
gonna
got to be
make a
looking
second
at like $200 million.
for sure.
I would assume so, but yeah, there was no plan when they released it. Even though the ending, it felt like they could have done a sequel.
What if they throw a curveball and make a rebooted sequel of the original movie?
Well, there's
from
already a
2000?
sequel.
They're gonna reboot this a whole new universe
Oh,
starting from that.
That's not a sequel.
Oh, it's
it's
not a
just
sequel?
another movie that takes place in the Dungeons and Dragons world,
Oh, okay.
and it is bad.
Did
Like
they-
my favorite scene is there's a dwarf who teleports somewhere and gets stuck in a wall and dies. Like that actually happens in the second movie, and it is bad.
I mean, technically that would make sense. Like if we actually had teleportation, that would probably have to do with science. If you did the wrong calculation, you could end up in a wall.
That's why we're just going to get rid of walls once we invent
Just no walls?
teleportation. We don't
Okay.
need it anymore.
Shitting's gonna be weird.
Just go out in the open, man.
Yeah.
Just let it out. It'd be fine.
Somebody teleports onto your lap and mid-shit. Well, this is awkward.
It's a double decker. You're fine.
Yeah.
So what about the characters of, not necessarily the characters, but the people playing the characters? The Chris Pines, the Michelle Rodriguez, the Hugh Grants. How are you guys with that? Like
Chris Pine was good. I think Michelle Rodriguez was like, I don't know. I would say not believable, but like, I don't know.
was that maybe her like that might be her personality as that character?
I
though.
know, but like I guess. I mean, it could have been any character though. I'm sure they probably paid her.
Oh,
an
you mean that
exorbitant
she
amount
herself
of money.
didn't bring really anything to the
No,
role?
yeah,
Gotcha.
like she's a forgettable actor to the character. Like it could have been literally anybody else,
Gotcha.
and it would have been the same thing.
Weird to me because I mean, regardless of what they say, she's a barbarian fighter. Like that's what her class is and race is supposed to be, right? But I don't know. She didn't really. I mean, she kicked ass in it, but she didn't look like that character. I mean, she was pretty small.
She is a small. But that's what I'm saying. Like she did.
That's what I'm saying.
She didn't bring anything to the character.
If I was casting that role, I wouldn't think, oh, you know who would be a great fighter, barbarian, or whatever? Michelle Rodriguez. I'd be looking for somebody like that chick who got kicked out of The Mandalorian for whatever.
Gina Carano.
That's what I
Yeah,
said too.
yeah.
Yeah, Gina Carano. I think
She
she'd have been
looks
a perfect
like
one.
she would be a brawler kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, she did used to fight in MMA.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, she was in
Ronda
MMA.
Rousey.
She got beat,
Ronda Rousey's an awful
or-
actor.
Well, they
I know,
never. That's the fantasy fight that never happened. Was Gina versus Ronda?
I'd
Yeah.
watch that.
That was very close to happening. But Gina was dominating everybody, and then got her ass kicked by Chris Cyborg, and then she went away.
No,
and then
let's
eventually
stop talking about this crap.
Then started acting.
We already did a stupid episode on wrestling and UFC.
What is this wee shit? You weren't there?
I thank God.
Hey,
All I would have been like is wrestling.
I feel like it's the most viewed podcast right now.
two
What?
people.
Maybe 3.
Oh,
Thank you. So what about you, Dan? Did you feel like with either Michelle or the other people that were portraying people, did you see them as bringing something to the roles or nothing?
Some more than others. I don't remember his name. Jean, the guy who played the Paladin.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent.
I
Did
liked him.
such a good job at bringing like kind of that cocky, I know everything role, but not being like over the top with it, but being very sure of themselves and knowing what they were doing and kind of telling other people like, you might be doing this wrong, and then continued to do what they thought was the right thing. excellent portrayal of what a paladin should be.
When
Excellent
he
portrayal.
walked off, and then they're like, "Oh, is he gonna go?" No, he's going right over the rock.
Yep.
That was great.
He just goes in a straight line.
Yeah, straight line. Nothing can deter.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I thought his character was quite good. It's interesting. I feel like if they have a sequel, he'll be a little bit heavier involved.
Oh yeah,
in like
for
the
sure.
main character. But
Would you want that though? Because there's something about a character that's only there for a little bit that when you overexpose, it's not as good.
Well, I feel like if we're going the way of the story and following the same story, and they start to invade with all of the wizards or sorcerers or whatever, him and his class.
well, his backstory too was like he saw the first whatever they call that. I'm gonna call it the purge because I don't know what to call it. But he was there for it as a child, so like
Well, he got infected
it is
by
his
it.
story. What's that?
He got infected by it.
Well, that's my point. But his parents were killed by
Yeah.
it. Like his whole people were.
Yeah.
So it fits that if they do a second movie focused on that invasion, that he would be at the forefront.
Or
Now-
or at least if the main crew from this one continues to do things, they'll continue to cross paths.
Yeah,
with
that's what I was thinking, and maybe obviously he'll be in the last big battle type of thing. But I think if you just have him there the whole time, I think one of the parts that made that character special was the weave in, weave out. He's got his own thing he's doing, and he's necessary at that moment, and then he's become not necessary as you continue on your path.
I just assume the second movie might be set up by him coming to them for assistance.
maybe
Because he believes there's a new plot, or they're going to be invading and he needs help. So
gotcha. Yeah,
and
definitely
so
possible.
then it's and he might. I mean, he doesn't have to survive. Like he could be killed off in that second movie.
Yeah, he doesn't really
and-
need to be there.
And then you still have him kind of coming in and out, and then just permanently out. So
Unless they find another one of those things and bring him back at the very end. Like they did with Michelle Rodriguez.
yeah, that was the one part to me that was like, all right, like we fucking know it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Oh, I finally got the thing that can bring back my wife and my child's mother, but now I'm gonna have flashbacks about how Michelle Rodriguez was really this child's mother because she raised her.
Well, it was the child that was having that, right? Or
No,
was it his
it was
flashbacks?
him. It was
Yeah,
him.
it was him.
Yeah.
And then he looked down at the child and she nodded, because she apparently saw his flashbacks too. It was like,
Well, I
Do
think
it.
so.
Do
the
part of-
slow
I
nod.
mean,
I've
from
never
Amy.
actually met my mother, so I don't really care.
See,
Just
that's the
do
thing
it.
too. Like if you think about it logically, she has never met her mother, and
I like
Michelle Rodriguez has basically been that mother for her.
I like to think the slow nod was, we just have to accept she's dead. And
Oh
bring back
shit! You're
Mom.
not bringing
Yeah.
back my mom.
Yeah, we'll try
Damn
to find
it.
another one for her, but I want to see my mom.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Isn't this the whole reason you left me alone for 2 years?
Yeah.
While you were in jail, and now we're not gonna bring her back?
Right.
Yeah.
right.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up. So let's start with final thoughts. We'll end with Dan because he's the guest. But we'll start with Mike of what your final thoughts of the movie were. And I also, before we get to that, how much of the 2000 movie did you watch? Did you get like only 5 minutes in?
Yeah, like I think 8 minutes.
8 minutes, and you were just like, "Fuck this movie."
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. We probably should have done that, but I'm a glutton for punishment.
It's the first movie you watched in my theater room.
That's
I
fair.
hope it- I hope
I
it was
started
worth
watching
it.
it on my phone, and then the first notification from like anything that popped up, I was
You were like, "Oh, thank God."
Yeah.
Yes, let's go.
I think it
deal
was like
with
one
this
of my
now.
streamers like notified that they were streaming, and then I was like, okay, I'll watch that instead.
All right. So final thoughts on this movie then.
The Dungeons and Dragons reboot
Yes.
was really good.
really good.
I liked it a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say solid like 9.3.
Now, would it have been a 9.4 if you remembered to put up your seat at the theater?
No, see that's what I'm saying. I was so enthralled in the movie, I didn't even remember that the seat could go back.
Even though his wife next to him, seat up. Me next to him, seat up. Casey next to us, seat up. He's so enthralled in the
Yeah.
movie.
I was like leaned forward too,
You
like
were-
I was like in pooping position.
I think it was like an hour and 15 minutes in. He was just like, "Oh yeah,
I was ready to go.
yeah." All right. What about you, Corey? What do we got? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I'd probably put it in the 8.5 range, but I'm really excited for them to make more movies. I like Chris Pine a lot, so I mean, I was happy to hear he was cast as kind of the roguish character. So
I don't feel like he's had many good movies lately, but this I do feel like was a good movie for him.
Star Trek?
That's a long time ago at this point.
I love
mean-
Carriers. That's a movie not everybody might have seen,
I
but
haven't
it's
seen it.
basically like a virus has swept the nation, and him and his brother and his girlfriend, and this girl his brother's like obsessed with. They're driving across country trying to get, but I mean it's just like a end of the world apocalyptic kind of movie, but it's really, I like it a lot.
Yeah, never seen it. But yeah, so I enjoyed it, and I'm not deep into anything D&D. I haven't even completed one. Well, do we consider the Rick and Morty one complete? Because we technically did.
we completed that one,
Yeah.
but yeah,
It wasn't.
that was just
great.
a weird, like, it was D&D, but not really.
Yeah. So for me, it was still very enjoyable. I don't think I liked it as much as you two did, but I still, like, for me, it's probably an 8 or an 8.5. And I'm excited if they do a sequel. Like, I'll go see it probably opening weekend or the week after or something like that, and hope they continue to progress this story along and see what else they can do in this D&D type of world, because there's so many different things they could do and so many different paths they could go on. And if it does make, I mean, it's clearly going to make its money back, but if it can make even more money and they want to dump even more money into the budget, then I'd be very curious what they're able to do. Because with $150 million, it looked pretty good. Like, everything there, nothing there looked out of place or looked bad, unlike the 2000 movie. So I'd be very interested, like, if they throw another $50 million at it, how well it can look and how much more extravagant they can go.
Question is do they need to? Like, do they need to put another $50 million?
I know studios love to do that. You look at the
Like,
first...
again, I feel like they could have cut Michelle Rodriguez out of the budget.
That's not
Save
that much.
themselves
That's not that much money.
$2 million.
Yeah, but that's still $2 million.
Okay, $2 million with the CGI versus forgettable barbarian.
I wouldn't necessarily say forgettable. It could have been anybody. I agree, but I think you still need that character.
That's called forgettable.
Sure, but you still need the character. You just mean her herself. Like,
Right.
We could have put you in that role.
Yeah, and paid me $5.
Mike's a little cheap. It's fine.
I'll do anything once Fred does.
Good to know. Good to know. I need to stop by the ATM. All right, Dan. So what we got? Final thoughts from you on the movie and then D&D in general.
So, final thoughts on the movie for me. I give it a solid 9. Like, there was always some things that could be improved, but overall, very well done. It really captured the feel of, for me, what a Dungeons and Dragons campaign is like. Because it had some of those moments that were the funny parts that you have in the campaign. And it had the overarching story. It had the item you were looking for. It had the big villain you were trying to take down. And then, like, the smaller villains along the way. So it did a very good job at capturing the essence of that storytelling without making it seem too heavy-handed or too in-your-face about it. So I think it did a great service to the hobby. I think it did a great service to kind of the nerd community in general, because we've already seen this push with comic book movies and some of the bigger fantasy things of old, you know, whether it was, we were talking about Chronicles of Narnia earlier, you know, when that came out and had its resurgence, and then Lord of the Rings, and then Game of Thrones. And there has been this push for fantasy things, even The Witcher. And D&D has always been kind of like the fantasy royalty in the background, but it's so personal to everybody who plays it. How do you make a movie that shows that personal experience? And I think they found a way to do that.
Well, I think the way to do it is not to think of it as D&D, so to speak. Think of it as a movie, and then you kind of know a setting, you kind of know some characters, and then just write it that way, rather than having like a quote-unquote campaign in mind. Think of it like a movie, and it'll be a movie, which in this case it was. And if you can intermingle those two things, I think you got a success, which is what they did.
They already know how to not do it.
Yeah.
They just figure out what the people didn't like about that and change it.
Well, I'll be interested for if and when they do a sequel, if it's like the same screenwriter, because that would make me more apt to go, okay, it's probably going to be good again, rather than if it's somebody else, okay, now you're going to take this original person's vision? And are you going to be able to recapture that success? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. All right. So we have wrapped this puppy up. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good movie. Pretty good movie, yeah.
It's good.
It's good. Good. All right. So next week, I have no fucking idea what we're going to be talking about. I didn't plan that far ahead. Thought we'd all be dead by now. Wishful thinking. We'll figure it out, though.